Tyler Childers' new album Snipe Hunter dropped this past Friday, and it's safe to say that the fan reaction has been divided. Some have expressed their admiration for the album's sonic boldness, while others have expressed their disappointment with the ways it has strayed from the sound that drew them to his music originally. So why does this album have the fan community so split? I'm going to try and decode some of the dissonance surrounding the fan dialogue around this album, but I think in order to really understand it, instead of doing a track-by-track breakdown, we really need to view this album in the wider context. First off, a little background. Kentucky luminary Tyler Childers, one of the most well-respected Appalachian artists in country music today, announced back in June that he would be releasing a new album called Snipe Hunter, produced by legendary record producer Rick Rubin, who's already worked with iconic country acts like Johnny Cash and the Chicks, but has also been a player in some of the biggest records of the modern era, regardless of genre. Ahead of the album, Childers released 2 singles that would be quite familiar to longtime fans of his. Nose on the Grindstone, which he had previously released on his Our Vinyl session, and Oneida, an older live staple of his that has never been released or recorded in any other capacity. Again, to reiterate, both of these are fan favorite songs that have never been on a previous Tyler Childers album, and both of them kind of point to an older songwriting style, something out of Tyler's past. However, after my first full listen of the album, my initial thought was, what the hell are these songs doing on this album? Because they sound nothing like the newer tracks. If you've listened to Snipe Hunter by now, you're aware that it is a heavily experimental album, unlike anything we've heard from Tyler Childers before. Partially as a result of his collaboration with Rick Rubin, but also because of his work with mixing engineer Nick Sanborn, who, according to a GQ article, Childers told to make the album weirder and asked him to mix like he was painting a painting, not like he's trying to dial in the perfect snare sound. The culmination of these different efforts appear as wild modulation on the audio effects, different elements such as bells and a Hare Krishna choir. We're hearing a more punk rock edge, we're hearing more vocal effects on Tyler's voice, and really just coming together to create something that is so different from anything else that you would normally associate with Tyler Childers' sound. In retrospect, we can recognize that Oneida gave us the first taste of what was to come on this album, because even though the sound of it harkens back to an older, more country troubadour style for Childers, there's a solo section in the middle that's blown up of big pedal steel, big fiddle, all with some wild modulation and effects on it. It sounds very cosmic, and I believe I described it in a previous video as the universe caving in on itself. But even then, though, that song is still, at its core, rooted very much in a classic country style. So it still begs the question, why would he include these 2 songs on this album? And that's when I realized putting those 2 songs out as the lead singles was part of the snipe hunt. For those that aren't familiar with the concept of a snipe hunt, it's basically a prank that's pulled by older, more experienced hunters on their younger, less experienced counterparts, sending them out in the woods on their own to hunt for a made-up species of wildfowl called a snipe. This is of course always unsuccessful, with the younger hunter realizing eventually that they're being made a fool of and that they're being hazed. A similar expression would be sending someone on a fool's errand or sending them chasing shadows, spending a lot of time looking for something that isn't there. And by teeing these songs up as the lead singles for this album, Childers was able to send his listeners off on a snipe hunt of their own, searching for clues on the record's contents that they were never going to find. I'll explain. Childers has a long history of defying his fans' expectations. Long Violent History and Can I Take My Hounds to Heaven were both highly conceptual records that caught his fan base off guard. But both of these records also strongly speak to the way that Childers sees himself and conducts himself as an artist. He could probably keep on making albums like Purgatory and Country Squire again and again, over and over for the rest of his career, and he'd be set for life. But he'd rather keep on pushing the boundaries of his sound, even if it might alienate a certain breed of fan. Over the years, Childers has caught heat from fans that want him to be a certain way. They want him to make the music that they want to hear, not the music that he wants to make. And I think to some extent, Childers wanted to mess with those fans a little bit on this record, to flex his independence and say, hey, you don't know me quite as well as you think you do. I mean, he basically says as much on Poachers when he talks about the people he can hear talking behind his back about the way that they think he should be. Now, you might be thinking, isn't that a little bit of a stretch? But when you really think about Tyler Childers, and when you think about his other album rollouts and just kind of how ornate and big they're done, I really think he was going for something here. I think he was trying to run interference on the fan base and just throw us off the scent. So the first part of the Snipe Hunt here was letting fans believe that this was going to be a return to form, and possibly a collection of older songs that he had never actually released. The initial few weeks of the album cycle were dominated by fans wondering, oh, are we going to finally get Jersey Giant? Are we going to finally get Messed Up Kid? And all this other speculation. Childers preceded the record by dropping a preview video as well as releasing the album cover early, letting fans go through it with a fine-tooth comb to try and find whatever clues they could about the album that we were going to get. But once he dropped the track list, it was pretty evident that most of the speculation had no basis in reality, except for a few hints like, the woman named Oneida in the video and also Nose on the Grindstone playing. By the way, I just want to say, I bought this hook, line, and sinker. On the previous videos I did about this album, I talked about Jersey Giant, I talked about the return to form and the older songs and everything, and yeah, I fell victim to the Snipe Hunt, which honestly kind of makes it fun. Even after the track list dropped though, I don't think any of us could have really imagined how wildly different this album would be from previous Tyler Childers releases. Something that clearly pissed a lot of fans off. Look, if you think this album isn't for you, that is totally fine. Nobody's gonna make you listen to it, and you can always listen to the Tyler Childers songs from before that you do enjoy. But I want to encourage you not to write it off so quickly, as a lot of people have done. Because I think once you get past the initial shock of some of these new sounds and new styles on this album, you start to realize that there's some really interesting stuff going on here. But I really think it takes a few listens for it to set in. First off, that grit that drew many of us to Childers in the first place is very much present on this record. He sounds wily and unhinged on songs like the opening track Eatin' Big Time, on Dirty Yacht Trill, on the song Snipe Hunt. There's also a ton more of that unhinged energy packed into Bitin' List, which might be one of the funniest new sayings I've heard in a while. Like, that's definitely entering my vocabulary. And even though he changes that one line in Nose on the Grindstone, this version still carries with it a ton of heft, and Childers' voice sounds chilling on it. Some people have said they don't like it because they think Childers abandons his Appalachian roots on this album, which I just don't really think is true either. So much of the songwriting on this album is rooted around hunting culture, and even though many of the sounds are processed or modulated or paired with sounds that aren't traditionally in country music, at the base, the instrumentals are still acoustic guitar, they're still fiddle, banjo, pedal steel. All these instruments that are so central to country music are present on this record. They're just played in a different way. Hell, even the way a lot of the harmony vocals on this record are arranged, like the background vocals on Dirty Yacht Trill, they're reminiscent of old school gospel singers. Like when I hear the background vocals on Dirty Yacht Trill, I'm hearing the Statler Brothers influence on those. They're just presented in a way that's different from what we're used to hearing. And that pushes the line, and it might take some getting used to for some people. And beyond the record, Childers has never abandoned his Kentucky roots. He never moved to Nashville or anywhere else, instead choosing to stay home in eastern Kentucky and raise livestock with his family. I also don't feel like anyone that's been listening to Childers for a while should be too surprised by the spirituality on this album. Universal Sound, Born Again, and even Angel Band should kind of give an indication that Childers is a bit of a spiritual wanderer, and so I'm really not all that surprised when I hear elements of Hinduism and Hare Krishna and Buddhism make their way onto this album. And while Tomcat and a Dandy isn't necessarily my favorite song on this album, I'm not as put off by the Hare Krishna chant on this album as I am by, let's say, the past two Northcote albums. The album feels willing to explore spirituality without trying to push on the listener. Something that I can appreciate about it. It just seems like it's open to it. And at the end of the day, we still get the same great lyricism we have come to expect from a Tyler Childers record. Even though it can be grisly at times, Eatin' Big Time has some great storytelling on it, and some great use of details. Tirtha Yatra also has some great storytelling on it, and it's really a lyric unlike anything else I've heard in country music before. And I also appreciate that little self-deprecating bit about the club-footed cousin loving something something, trying his best to pronounce these different places in India. I just find it kind of endearing. Cutting Teeth and Getting to the Bottom see Childers reflecting on his younger days and sobriety, and they each include some kind of edgy and funny lines on them as well. Now, all that said, I'm not going to sit here and claim I love absolutely everything about this album. Even though I find the koala lines in Down Under kind of funny, as a whole, I find that song kind of annoying. I'm not sure how I feel about the incorporation of the Weiss Watch bit in Eatin' Big Time, because I know Childers has a collaboration with them, so it kind of comes off as brand incorporation if you know that. The keyboard solo on Getting to the Bottom is kind of abrasive to my ears. And even though I appreciate the way they help pull off the snipe hunt theme in the lead up to this album, I do still feel like Oneida and Nose on the Grindstone feel a bit out of place on this album. There's a pretty night and day difference between these two songs and the rest of the songs on the album, and you can just tell that Childers has changed a lot as a writer since he wrote them initially. I'm not saying they're any better or worse than other songs on this album. They are both fantastic songs. Nose on the Grindstone is obviously one of Tyler Childers' masterworks. They just don't really feel like they fit on this record, if that makes sense. At the end of the day, I think a lot of the discontent around this album boils down to one thing. Country music is a genre that's rooted in tradition, and as a result, it tends to be more resistant to experimental styles and new ideas. People freaked out in 1949 when drums were introduced to the Grand Ole Opry for the first time. You would think with the genre's long history and popularity that there would be more examples of avant-garde music within the genre's borders. And yet even like alternative country and Americana, genres that kind of claim to be on the outer edges of what is country music, isn't really all that edgy, honestly. It tends to be pretty tame. And even when it does get edgier, it's mostly because it's incorporating DNA from other genres like punk. This album is by no means tame in its embrace of abrasive and experimental sounds. And personally, I find that really interesting. But I can also understand why that is scaring off some more traditionally inclined listeners. Long before this album was announced, I had already begun working on a concept for a video about why there isn't more experimental country music. If that sounds interesting to you, let me know in the comments below, because I think it would be kind of a neat side quest to explore. In organizing my thoughts on this album, I was drawn back to a quote by Charlie XCX that I came across a few months ago. Responding to some criticism of her live show, she said, "The best art is divisive and confrontational, and often evolves into truly interesting culture, rather than being like kind of okay, easily understood, and sort of forgettable." Indeed, this album screams in your face to pay attention, and it might be jarring at times, but this album is anything but forgettable. Tyler Childers is an artist that doesn't want to be painted in a corner. And by this point, he's proven that we really can't anticipate what he's got coming next. He wants to make the art that moves him, and has stayed independent for years to accomplish this. People might come along and say things like sobriety changed him, Rick Rubin changed the sound too much, Senora May changed him, or all manner of ridiculous things. But I don't think any of that is true. I think if anything, those factors have allowed him to become the artist that he's wanted to be all along. While I'm still trying to process a lot of this album, I do like it, and I am excited to see where Tyler Childers takes us next. Which, by the way, given how wildly different Childers' last 4 albums have been from one another, I think it's fair to say that even if this one was a miss for you, he may still have something in store for the future that is up your alley. Or just listen to the albums you like. That's always fine too. Those are my thoughts on this new Tyler Childers album. What do you think? Is it a new favorite? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in between, still trying to figure it out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Brent Funkhauser from Red Moon Media. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy Americana, alternative country, roots music generally, I talk about all that kind of stuff here on this channel, so go ahead and subscribe and follow along. Alright, thanks for watching.